A lot of you have been asking to hear the story of me and my husband. Well, stay tuned. I'm going to give you all the details next. You found the Very Cari podcast. Grab yourself a cup of coffee and snuggle in while you and I chat about all things faith, wellness, and healing. Welcome to the Very Cari podcast, where this week I'm going to try to keep it short and sweet, but I want to tell you the story of me and my husband and how God ultimately works all things for good, which doesn't mean that I didn't try to really screw up my life. I'm going to be transparent with you. I've been married before, and I have made choices I'm not proud of. Definitely journeyed down the wrong road, definitely picked, I won't say the wrong people, but maybe not ideal, right? A lot of you have been that situation. And I don't want to spend time talking about exes, so we will not. But just know that was in my past. And I found myself about 13 years ago, um, staring down the single mom life with two kids, two older kids, and a 2-year-old. And it was a very scary place to be. But I had confidence in my ability to provide for my children. You know, I was a nurse. I am a nurse, and I knew that I could make good money, and I had insurance, and I had a house, and it was all going to be okay. But in order to hear the rest of that story, I'm going to have to go back in time. I'm going to have to go back in time to the late 1950s, early 1960s, when my dad, Papa Larry, and Brandon's dad, Wayne, were friends. I believe they met in 6th and 7th grade. And so they met then, and they were friends growing up. And eventually, they were buddies. They went to church camp. My dad first met Brandon's mom at church camp. Of course, many of you know that she has passed recently at the time of this recording. Brandon's dad is still with us, and as are both my parents. And my mom and dad got married, and I believe the exact same summer that Brandon's parents were married as well. So they got married together, and then they had their first babies together. And that was me and Brandon. Now, Brandon was born on March 21st, and I was born on April 18th. So we're just like 3 weeks apart. And my favorite story, I told this at my mother-in-law's memorial service, but this is how close our families were. At one point, um, my mom went in for her 6-week checkup. Now, listen, back in the day, you didn't take your babies back to the doctors. I mean, you dressed up for the doctors the same as dressing up for an airplane flight, and things were very different. But I sat in the waiting room with Brandon's mom. Her name was Karen, and Brandon. So I would have been 6 weeks and Brandon would have been 9 weeks old. And somebody got to squawking. I'm sure it was Brandon. He probably started it. And he got to crying. And then I got to crying. And poor Karen's out there in that waiting room with both of us, just throwing a big old fit. So my mom tells the story that she walked out of the doctor's office, and she saw that Karen was nursing me on one side and my husband on the other side. And she's like, what is happening? But they were friends. I guess that's what you do for your friend. So I have had a lifetime with Brandon. We went to kindergarten together. There are pictures of that. We, as little babies, we took baths together. We went camping together. We went fishing together. He was just always a part of my life. And as we grew up and got a little bit older, we moved to Idaho, and then Brandon's parents and his family followed a little bit later. And at that time, of course, I was very much a nerd. I'm just going to say it. I know it's hard to believe, but I was very much a nerd. I still am. Let's be honest. I was all about studying and working hard, and I was really a lot about Jesus, and I was just all about doing the right thing and working. And Brandon was a little bit different from that. Now, he was a very hard worker. He loved hunting. He loved, working on his truck, but he was amazing at sports. In fact, he was scouted by the pros to be a pitcher, and he played college baseball, and he was very, very, very good. Very 100-mile-an-hour fastball, not even exaggerating. The man has an arm. And he, had a couple things come up in life. Yeah, had to give that up. And so he joined the army. Now we grew up together. We graduated high school together. There you'll. I'm going to see if I can give uh, my podcasting guy Ron pictures of us when we were in high school and as babies. Maybe he can. If you guys are watching this version, you can catch a couple pictures. But if not, listen, they're all over my Instagram and my Facebook account. But we graduated high school together. Like I was going to say, there is a picture of us dancing at one of the proms together. I had a beautiful permed mullet, I believe. And I'm sure Brandon had a mullet. I mean, he was cool. And, especially if you've seen Brandon from his younger years, he's always been very handsome. Those blue eyes that just have melted the hearts of more women than I think anybody is allowed to. He's just always been a very attractive person and has always attracted women. So I was definitely not that. I had a serious boyfriend in high school, and that was not my thing. Like I had a different thing in life. But truth be told, y'all, I probably always had a crush on Brandon my whole life. I mean, but he was so unattainable because he was so handsome and so good at sports. I mean, he was the full meal deal, right? I mean, he had the mullet, he had a gold chain, he had, stonewashed cargo pants. I mean, really, what else was there? He could dance, you know? He was handsome, he was good at sports, he was polite and respectful to other people. The moms of all these women, they loved him because he was so kind. So you can see where we didn't match, okay? So let's fast forward. So you get the picture. We graduate high school together, everything, and we go our separate ways. So I go to Lewis Clark State College, I get my first degree, get married, have a couple kids. He works for just a little bit, joins the army and starts his army career. He gets married. So we have these separate lives, right? But I always tried to kind of keep in touch with him over the years, and keep in touch with his family, and just really always thought about him. And okay, so fast forward to single Cari with 3 kids. This is the best story. At the time, Brandon was living. Neither of us, of course, were with anybody. I mean, that wasn't even like it was way past any of that. So we had both been single for quite a while. And I was on Facebook and was ranting because I had been thrust back into the dating scene and found that a lot of people didn't want, the whole kid package. And I was like, yes, sorry, I have kids. Like, this is kind of how it is. And so I think I had a post that said something like this: listen, my kids and I are a package deal. If you can't just date me, it's everybody, or it's not. I was probably ranting and raving about something. That was it. People were like, you go, girl, don't settle. Me, me, me. And I was like, you know what? I don't need love. I don't need love. And something inside me was so broken. Something inside me was so discouraged. Something inside me, I know you thought this was going to be a fun podcast, but listen, if anybody's out there right now and you are where I was, man, I get it. I was so heartbroken. And I wasn't heartbroken because of the divorce. I was heartbroken because my traditional upbringing in Christianity had taught me wrongly. I'm just going to say it. You guys have heard my podcast. There's not only one, right? There's not only one. That sounds grammatically incorrect. Anyway, I had been taught that there was just one person for you, your soulmate. There was just one person. And divorce was never an option and all these things. And here I was staring down failure. I felt like very much like God was mad at me, that God was disappointed in me. And I didn't have the walk with God that I do now. And that it was never going to happen for me. I just buckle down, raise these kids, and just live your life, Cari. Just live it, because all the dreams and the hopes you have for someone that loves you and cherishes you, all the ideas that you have about a future, it's just not going to happen. So let it go. And I was broken inside. I was so broken that I would walk into a church and just cry because the presence of God, although I love the presence of God, and now I love the presence of God. And I always had my whole life, but for some reason, the presence of God at that point in my life really caused this guilt. And it was just the enemy. But I could not reconcile the choices I had made in the disappointment I had been. I felt like I disappointed my parents, disappointed my sisters, somehow disappointed my family. And it was just very heavy on me. So I had written off love. I was not looking for love in all the wrong places. I was not looking for love at all, y'all, at all. In fact, I was a little bit jaded. I mean, I went on some dates, but you date one guy and he wants you to, hey, look at my ex-wife. Oh, well, what? You date another guy who's like, yeah, I'm not really into kids. What? So I'd given up, just given up. And then after I made that little post, all of a sudden my Facebook Messenger, bing. Remember when we used to have our notifications on our phone? My phone's on silence 24/7, unless I'm on call. So I was like, it's Brandon Thompson. I mean, like, look at him in a uniform. Holy Hannah. I mean, who can resist a man in uniform, right? Right? All my ladies, all my ladies. Um, so I was like, huh. And I took it totally as a friend thing. He's like, what's up? And I'm like, oh my gosh, Brandon, I haven't talked to you in forever. It's so good to hear from you. Like, where are you living? What's going on? He's like, I'm living in North Carolina. I'm getting ready to move to Alaska. And I'm like, that's amazing. He's like, I've wanted to go back up there for years. I'm like, this is great. I was like, well, when are you driving through? And he's like, I'm driving through this time. And I was like, well, my mom and dad would love to see you. We were all living in the same area at that time. We would love to see you. And then he starts asking me questions. And for those of you that are listening, I'm looking at my phone, okay? And I'm reading these questions and I'm like, huh. So I get my mom, she's over watching the baby or something. And I'm like, Mom, can you read this messenger message for me real quick? Can you just look at this? She's like, yeah, I don't mind. So she has to get her glasses on. She backs up away from the phone and she says, I said, is he flirting with me? Surely not Brandon Thompson. Surely not handsome, gorgeous, talented, mysterious bad boy. Not Brandon Thompson. Like, he is not flirting with me. There's no way. And so she reads it and she goes, huh. She scroll back. I mean, I didn't have anything to hide. She's like, I think he is flirting with you. And I'm like, wait a minute, what? And she's like, I think he's flirting with you a little bit. Like, yeah, well, you look great. And gosh, I can't believe you're this old. You sure look, can you believe that? And I'm like, wait a minute. Like, I was shocked, y'all. I was shocked. So we kind of start talking. And I am not 1000% not looking for a relationship. And he suggests that I just come out for a trip, get away from the kids, and come out and see him in North Carolina. So he books a ticket and I go out and see him. And the minute I saw him, it was like no time had passed. And I was always halfway in love with him anyway, but I 1000% fell in love with him. 1000% head over heels, crazy in love with him. And I guess the feeling was mutual. We went out to eat. We went fishing. We rode his Harley. We just got to know each other again. And when I had to leave to come back home, I cried and cried and cried because it was like I had been missing him for so many years and didn't even know it. And when I met him after not seeing him for so many years, it was like we had been together forever. I mean, instantly, like there's no awkwardness. There's no getting to know you. There's no, Because when I would say, "Oh, so and so from our previous life, or Aunt so and so, or Uncle so and so," I mean, he knows who my aunts, my uncles are, my grandpa, my parents, my sisters. I know all of his history. I know the back. I know his parents. I know his siblings. I know, his grandma and grandpa. And like, there's no introductory period. There's no like, well, I have a sister and she, or I have this brother. There's none of that. It was like smooth. It was like we had been together 40 years. It was the weirdest thing. I have never in my life experienced it with anybody. So I got on the plane. Oh, sorry. Right before we left, we were standing, we went over to his house and we were standing in his kitchen. And he said to me, I said, well, what are we doing here? And he said, I'd like to make this work. I'd like to try and see if we can make this work, if that's okay with you. And I was like, yes, but I didn't have high hopes. I didn't have, and I still wasn't sure. I just was not sure. So I went back home and we started talking on the phone. Y'all, this is before FaceTime. Can you believe that? So we started talking on the phone and long conversations, texting, and, kind of just really securing our relationship. And then one night he told me he loved me and I just couldn't believe it. Like it was like the romance I had always hoped would happen to me in my life and finally did. And so he came through heading to Alaska. So he packed up all of his stuff in North Carolina and drove through from Alaska. He was going to stop and say hi to my parents and say hi to me and, meet my kids and all this kind of stuff. And he was already in love with Anne Marie. I mean, that man has loved Anne Marie since the very first time when she was 2 years old that he talked to her on the phone. That man has loved Anne Marie. So he comes through and he stops, and unbeknownst to me, he goes out with my dad. Like they go out and they do, I don't know, it's fall, like hunting stuff or something like that. And he asked my dad if he can marry me. And my mom and dad, of course, they've known him since he was a baby. They went and visited him in the hospital. They were best friends with his friend, his mom and dad. So that my dad said, if you're crazy enough, yes, no, I'm sure he didn't say that. So Brandon asked me to marry him. And I just couldn't believe that something good was going to happen to me. I couldn't believe that after all I'd done wrong, and after the sins I'd committed, and after the people I'd hurt, that something beautiful might happen to me. But nevertheless, not being one to ponder very long and not being the one to mull over decisions, because I ain't that person, I married Brandon that weekend in front of my sister, Christy, and her husband, Miles's fireplace in Boise, Idaho, with my mom and dad, my sister, my niece, Ellie, and Miles. And that's the end. No, I'm just teasing. And I came back. Brandon had to go to Alaska. So he went to Alaska and I worked on what did it look like for me to change my life to being with Brandon. It took some time. I had to uproot everything. And I believe that I probably could have done it a little bit differently. I definitely hurt some people. Um, Definitely could have done it a little bit differently. It was hard on my older kids. And I regret that now. I regret that it was hard on them. Um, so, I have some regrets with that situation. I wish I'd done things just a little bit differently. But nevertheless, those are the choices and the plans I made. I really needed to get out of the area I was in because of some interpersonal things with people that were formerly in my life. I will say it like that. How does that sound? But God, as I was married to Brandon, God began to heal my heart. And God began to show me that I was worthy of someone who loved me just for me, for all my weirdness, for all my craziness, for my, obsessive cleaning, my moving furniture around at 2 o'clock in the morning, for just the authentic, real Carrie that I am, that you guys see because I'm I'm loved enough by God, and I'm loved enough by somebody in my life that it's okay to be me. It's okay. I don't have to be anybody else. I don't have to act. I don't have to be a certain weight. I don't have to be a certain look. None of that. Like I can just be me. And I think being with Brandon, it was the first time that I had been loved so simply. Does that make sense? It wasn't complicated. It didn't come with strings. It didn't come with expectations. It was just, I just love you. There's an old song from when I was a kid that went like this. It said, He gave me beauty for ashes, the oil of joy for mourning, the garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness, that we might be trees of righteousness, the planting of the Lord, that he might be glorified. God gave me beauty for ashes. I made absolute burn to the ground, nothing left but the rafters, ashes of my life. I have so many regrets, so many things I wish I could do over, so many things I wish I could change. And it hurts when I look back. But God reached down and he knew what I needed and he grabbed my hand and he pulled me up out of that clay, out of that situation, out of that hate, out of that guilt, out of that shame, out of that rejection, out of that feeling distance from Christ. He didn't give up on me. He didn't give up on me. He loved me when I was walking through divorce. He loved me when I was walking through the pain of hurting my children and my family. He loved me as I sat in the shower and I cried because I felt like there was no other way. He loved me through all of that. He loved me through all the mistakes. And he loved me enough. He loved me enough not to leave me where I was, right? And he loved me enough to send me someone who, even though he doesn't even know he does it, shows me God's love and how completely and how totally he loves me. And it's a choice. It's not a feeling, y'all. It's certainly not been easy. We've been through things with PTSD. Brandon's had multiple surgeries. I've had my medical things. We've moved, the army deployments. I'm not saying it's been easy, but I've never doubted that Brandon loves me 100%. And as I was beginning to heal, you guys got me in my feels today. As I was able to heal from my brokenness, I began to say, okay, Lord, like I'm ready to come back into a deeper fellowship with you. I'm ready to begin to accept your love again. And when I turned around and I looked to my side and I looked for the Lord, guess what, y'all? He was right there. He never left. He never left. And so the story of Brandon and I is a love story. It's a story of reuniting. It's a little bit like a Hallmark movie. It's a little bit, it's a great story. But the big story here is that through my husband, God has allowed me and I have allowed myself to heal. and I've allowed myself to be loved and to be accepted and to be cherished and to be cared for and to be protected. I'd never had that before. Someone that would literally step in front of a bullet for me or take anybody on. I pity the person that tries to hurt me. I tell you, that is not a fight you want. My husband's like hyper vigilant, hyper protective, and I love it. I've never had it my whole life. My dad wasn't that way, and that's fine. And previous relationships, I never had that. Man, I'll tell you, almost to a fault. Brandon's like, don't get me in a fight because you know I'm going to finish it. You're right. I will not get you in a fight. I've never known that. I've never known that kind of love. So I am thankful for the fact that God loved me enough to never leave me. He never forsaked me, forsaken, but however that goes. He never left me. He never abandoned me. He didn't leave me in the muck. He didn't leave me in the mire. He didn't leave me not being loved. He knew that I needed somebody. He sent my husband, who inadvertently, not even knowing it, has loved me so purely that it has allowed my heart to heal. And it has allowed me to step forward into what God has for me. And He has given me God between those two relationships, and give God all the glory. I can do this. I can coach. I can be a part of your life. I can do this podcast. I can reach out and touch other people because I feel so secure in my relationship with Christ and in my relationship with my husband. So that's my story, my amazing, awesome story. I do have a scripture for you. Okay, here we go. I'm looking at my phone. I don't have the big Bible up here. Isaiah 61:3. To all who mourn, he will give a crown of beauty for ashes, a joyous blessing instead of mourning, festive praise instead of despair. Let's pray. Lord, thank you. Thank you for compelling me to share my crazy story about my husband and how we got together, Lord. And I hope that it touches somebody's heart. But more than the love story, God, I hope that everyone listening to the sound of my voice will know that for God so loved the world that he sent his only begotten Son, that whosoever will believe on him shall not perish and shall have everlasting life, because that is the message here. The message here, Lord, that I want to send out to all these people is that you are the God of second chances. You are the God of redemption. Nobody has gone too far from your reach. That I don't care what you've done, God is there for you. And Lord, I ask that that message would go forth, that redemption, salvation, and love can be found in a relationship with you. And Father, for my marriage and for this story, I give you all the glory, all the honor, and all the praise, Jesus. Amen. Thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode. If you would like to find out more about what I am up to, go to verycaripodcast.com, click on the menu button, and under the tab You Are Here, that's a U and an R and a here, you can find out about the coaching I am now offering. I would love, love, love to have you be a part of what I am doing. Head to the website, check it out, and thanks again for joining me today.